Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at MIPIM to talk about co-living as a new form of hospitality. My name is Claire. I co-founded CoLive, the global network and movement for co-living, and I'm now head of research and development for investment firm Keys Asset Management. I am here today with Dimfi from the Student Hotel, Maxime from Urban Campus, and Yorick from Velocity. Before I ask them to introduce themselves, I'd like to talk about what co-living is for a couple minutes so we all start on the same page. So according to CoLive, the global co-living network, co-living is a form of managed habitation where people share space and resources to access better quality of life. So there's an element of sharing, of course, spaces or resources. There's professional management, and there's an intent for positive impact on people's lives. And co-living can generally be described as a function of the target population, a duration of stay, and a certain level of services. Compared to a typical residential building, I believe co-living brings affordability because sharing makes the good less expensive to consume. It brings flexibility, thanks to hotel-like services that are added to your typical rental experience, and a sense of community because now more than ever, people crave for human connections. And in comparison to a hotel, and I hope we'll dive more into this in our conversation, co-living is simply a space that people can call home for maybe longer period of times than in your typical hotel. Formally, co-living is considered residential once people make their rental unit, their primary residence. And co-living is considered a hotel, even though extended stay, when people stay for shorter amounts of time at the same location than in their formal official primary residence. But that's mostly zoning laws speaking. And from a user experience point of view, it is my belief or my understanding that co-living spaces share a few common characteristics, whether they are hotel or residential. First, residents are always welcome to feel at home in a so-called hassle-free home where chores are generally taken care of by the operator. Residents get to meet and connect with one another thanks to careful community facilitation, hopefully leading to a genuine sense of belonging. People in co-living get the flexibility to move in and out freely of their rental as fast and seamlessly as they need to seize a job opportunity elsewhere or to suit their personal needs or family needs. And co-living pools resources at the building scale, which generally increases access to services and amenities that each individual on their own could likely not afford. So that's my 2 cents on what co-living is. And today we're in luck because we have 3 industry leaders to help us explore how co-living has become a rising popular asset, what is at stake with this rise and this new typology that co-living is, and what are the different investment models that professionals use to develop and deploy co-living assets around Europe and the world. So Dimfi, Maxime, and Yorick, the floor is yours. Please tell us who you are and who and what you do and work for in this new co-living world. Dimfi, maybe you want to start?
Oh, great. Thanks, Claire. Very good introduction. A nice differentiation between hotel and residential. I'm Dimfi van Wijk. I'm the head of real estate Benelux for the Student Hotel. So we are on the hotel end of the spectrum of co-living, although we also are exploring the other side as well. From a customer perspective, we like to think that there is very little difference between the two. The Student Hotel it brings together students, young professionals in purpose-built accommodation, but also hotel rooms, co-working, meeting, and events in a total hybrid hospitality concept. Our buildings are dynamic hubs where people meet, work, eat, drink, hold events, and stay from one night to a year. So TSH co-living for students or young professionals, mobile workers, are generally rooms that are available to them from a short to long period of time, anything from 3 months to a year. And we offer them a short to long-term housing solution and a very inclusive community. What's important for you to understand is that TSH is not only fully furnished rooms, but it's also extensive social spaces, restaurant. We offer half-board packages and cleaning, programming and events, a gym, and a co-working space, and therefore makes us a very complete offering to our residents in our buildings. I hope that gives you a complete picture of who TSH is and what we offer.
Awesome, thank you, Dimfy. Maybe Maxime, you could introduce yourself now and a different co-living concept, which is Urban Campus.
Sure, thanks, Claire. And first of all, thank you, Claire, for the interesting piece of paper you issued 2 days ago, I think, or yesterday on co-living. So thanks for it. I thought it was full of really useful insights. So thanks for it. So I'm Maxime Depreux. I'm head of development for Urban Campus. Urban Campus is a French and European co-living operator since our first operations started in Madrid, where we manage 6,000 square meters. Beyond the management of space, the two other pillars that we have at Urban Campus is one, the technology, not only in terms of interaction with the residents and how to improve the experience of our residents, but also technology interfacing with the building itself in order to optimize the management of the building. And secondly, the community management, where beyond sharing spaces, we have developed our own community content in order to to animate the communities and to make sure that residents can progress their personal or professional projects. In terms of co-living views, what I think one of the points in your interesting intro was the fact that for me, it's in the end something people can call home, independently of the zoning. And to do so, basically at Urban Campus, we consider that we are just a humble managed residential operator. In the end, we manage homes for people. Indeed, it's fully furnished, it's plug and play, there is a community feeling and services, thanks to this sharing economy that you were referring to, Claire, in your introduction. But in the end, we see our business as a managed residential business independently of the zoning. And for example, one difference with the models that you just talked about, Dimfy, is that we do not welcome people for a night at Urban Campus. We tend to foster longer stays in order to people to feel more comfortable and be more comfortable calling it home.
Awesome, thank you, Maxime, for this introduction. Yorick, would you want to tell us who you are? You're not an operator, so what you do and what's your take on all this?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you so much, Claire. I'm really excited to speak on this overdue panel. My name is Yorick Beyer. I'm the founder of Velocity, and we do urban strategies, mainly across Europe, also a bit in Australia. And for me, the angle is indeed not from an operational point of view, but my clients, whether they are more from a corporate perspective, like Nike or Siemens, from a student accommodation perspective, or from a university even, they all look for mixed use, and they look for this sort of new hybrid way of thinking around living, working, and learning. And whether the anchor then really is a residential operator or the anchor is a workplace provider, it's all about the mix. And what fascinates me is what we do is support on positioning, on programming, on partnerships. And I think one of the questions really that I hope to touch upon later is, of course, how this whole new thinking around co-living, which we have been exploring also with the class of 2020 and the European think tank on university cities that have been driving for a couple of years, is how do we make sure that cities really thrive, and what do we need in that sort of urban ecosystem in terms of accommodation, in terms of infrastructure for learning, places where people can play and stay. How do we make sure that cities become really resilient? And I think that's also an interesting moment right now that we have in this whole coronavirus, of course. Like, what is the new sort of mix in cities, and what can players like the Student Hotel and Urban Campus do in order to really get more momentum and make cities thrive again?
Awesome. So if we stay with you, Yorick, and build on this thought, what do you think are the underlying forces that drive people to co-living? And where do you think the opportunity is for professionals in the real estate industry?
Yeah. I mean, these are two very different questions. In a way, I think from a sort of meta point of view, of course, the drivers are obvious ones, like affordability, access to urbanity. I mean, I think there's a strong tendency, and I don't see coronavirus changing that, by the way, strong tendency to move to the core. I think people will always like to be part of that urban ecosystem where they meet, where they have the serendipitous encounters. I think social connection, really. I think we've built too much isolated sort of single houses where people are just like on their own. And I think in today's, even this sort of whole new virtual augmented reality we have now with Zoom like this, I think it only enforces for me that people are social species, and that we need to build infrastructures where people can mix. So access to the city, affordability, social connection. And I think, I mean, what makes that interesting, of course, from an investment point of view, is that there's just a big gap in that whole sort of scheme of the property rental market. I think for a lot of youngsters, and I appreciate that Europe is very diverse when it comes to housing issues and regulations, but I think everywhere there's a problem for people that want to be flexible, want to be part of this sort of picture I just sketched, but just can't afford to buy an apartment in a city, and then are sort of forced to live in a very uninteresting, to say the least, city fringe location. So I think there's a clear gap on the demand side of things. And I'm really curious also, again, to see how sort of also this moment now, and what we've seen happening over the last months in the pure hotel market, for example. I think there is also an opportunity again to rethink what does hospitality mean, and how will cities really provide that new petri dish for youngsters to live. And apart from them being a student or a young professional, I think there's quite a wide cohort of people that would love to live in these kind of properties.
Since you touched upon COVID and its impact on the hotel industry, maybe Dimfy, you could tell us a little bit about your opinion on co-living in this weird era, if I can call it so, and also those drivers for co-living. What's bringing people to TSH?
Okay, so as a hybrid hospitality concept, we have, the wide spectrum between hotel guests and students who stay for 12 months, and young professionals who stay for that period of time as well. So obviously, as most hotel concepts, we have seen, a huge reduction in occupancy of hotel rooms, and that has pushed us to review how we can put those hotel rooms to better use again. Whereas in our heyday and 6 months ago, we easily filled these hotel rooms with tourists and business travelers. That is no longer the case. So obviously, co-living and our concept is a solution for that. And you see that we are not the only hotel who's contemplating that, and many hotel operators around us are actually beginning to offer the rooms to students and to young professionals. However, they don't have, we have really got a concept that caters to a longer stay customer, and that allows for, gives the community and the homeliness as well. So I think we're well placed to accommodate co-livers as well as students, and for a period of time. To answer your second question, did I answer your first question? Let me, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
To answer your second question regarding, what is driving co-living, and I have to agree with York and yourself in that matter. It really is. It's affordability and accommodation shortage, which we see in major capital cities at the moment. But it's also a question of lifestyle and flexibility and the experience that you have in those places. So whilst most co-living places are in capital cities, you also see them in some far-flung beach locations and where digital nomads travel to, where people who are seeking the experience and seeking the flexibility of being able to work from anywhere. And that, of course, is heightened by this COVID situation that we have at the moment. People can work from anywhere. And therefore, you're seeing, a new opportunity pop up for ourselves, for people who say, "Okay, I want to work a couple of months in Amsterdam or Vienna," we're looking at how we can accommodate that. So it really is a new opportunity for us, and we hope to be able to, to be able to grow that market going forward. Is that helping?
Thank you, Dimfy. So I hear in what you say resiliency, or maybe co-living is a vector of resiliency for hybrid models like yours.
Yeah, I think the hybridness of our model it offers us the resiliency to be able to accommodate different market situations.
Right.
It allows us to kind of it's not as simple as changing from one day to the next, but it does give us that flexibility to move and to accommodate different types of people in different situations.
Right. And you also said something that was interesting in when talking about this fluid boundary between hotel and home or residential, is people wanting and being able now to work from anywhere. And when you're talking about those lifestyle drivers that are social connections and flexibility, as Yorick said, I hear that TSH and hopefully a lot of co-living models will be able to offer much more in the remote life area, maybe to end users. Maxime, is it also your take? Is it different from urban campus? Do you see different drivers for co-living or different impacts of the COVID crisis on your model?
Sure. In terms of drivers, I would like to comment too. We talk about affordability. We need to, for people who are not so much into co-living, we maybe need to explain a bit more, because when you look at co-living prices, it does not look cheap. But the element to take into account, and you explain this in your studies, is that we're not talking only about a rent. We're also talking about utilities, about a gym, etc., access to facilities that people would pay on additional budgets in traditional residential. So indeed, the word affordable is important in terms of not being cheap, but in terms of being competitive versus a traditional residential. We are not a premium business, that's our view, at least at Urban Campus, not to be a premium business, to enable to reach a scalable solution for the housing situation. The housing situation or tension is actually, from a public point of view, being able to lodge more people on the same plot of land, but with not downgrading the experience. So it's not only densification, but the idea of sharing economy, and by putting some resources together, having access to a better experience. So how, from a public point of view, bring a solution to cities, as you were highlighting, Yorick. But at the same time, from a personal point of view, there are some personal drivers. First, next to affordability, I would put accessibility. Let's not forget that the traditional market is not much penetrable for many people, international people, foreigners arriving to new countries, to new cities, entrepreneurs who don't have pay lifts for like the last 6 months, etc. And myself, 1 year ago, I went back to the rental market and I was shocked by the pain it was to get a flat. I was a stable employee, etc., etc., and yet it took me 6 months to find a flat. So next to affordability, I would put the word accessibility in terms of penetration capacity or access capacity. But the main driver for the residents that we have at Urban Campus, and we did a survey, a residence survey last year, which is available on our website. Actually, out of what are the main reasons you decided to join Urban Campus, the highest one for 91% of the residents was the access to the community. To access to the community contents that we develop at Urban Campus also, as I was mentioning earlier, but this was the main driver. And actually, you were talking about COVID. I'm going to comment a bit more about the effect of COVID before and after, as you were asking, Claire. But I think in a post-COVID COVID world, and I was not with young children at home, but even with my partner, I think that the loneliness was, as the COVID just realized to everyone the challenge of loneliness. And having the capacity to feel home within its own private space, but from time to time when you feel like having access to community, to social life, to boundary, to warmth, is realized by the COVID crisis, I would say, and the strengths of the co-living model. And you were highlighting, of course, the access to facilities. And indeed, it was in the roots of co-living to offer access such as home working areas. I'm not talking about renting, co-working desk, etc., but just having access to a proper home working. We all talk about home working, and you can see that on all TV, news channel, etc. When I talk to my colleagues and some to my of the interns, etc., home working is a topic for rich people who can properly work at home. Most of our flats in Paris do not have like a room to work, or you're working on your sofa, and try to work on your sofa for 1 year. It's not that comfortable at the end. So having access to also facilities which are proper facilities to work from time to time or every day from home is important and related by this COVID element. In terms of COVID impact on the business itself, as Dimfi, we had some issues, not the same because we are not into hospitality. The issue in our models that we faced was that before COVID, 50% of our residents were international people. We welcome 27 nationalities within our residences. So with the closing of borders, some people quickly left before the border was getting closed. And of course, no one new arrived. So it created a temporary drop in occupancy. But as a matter of fact, as of September, we are now full back for bookings in our residences. Of course, we had to reposition our marketing, commercialization, solution positioning to domestic market versus a product which was spontaneously appealing for international people in terms of meeting new people when you arrive in a new country or a new city, getting access to a market which was really difficult for international people. And it just shows the resilience of the model. And in 4 months' time, we were able to switch from 50-50 international local to a 100% domestic market.
Oh, Maxime, there's a lot of train of thoughts I want to follow here. Maybe to piggyback or build upon what you said on social equity and working on your couch. If you look closely at the SDGs, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, you'll find that actually providing a proper place of work to people close to their homes that makes their lives, their everyday lives easier, is a driver for positive impact in the world. So I hope that we make that clear and more obvious to users and to investors in the future in co-living, because that's a very important aspect of co-living that we don't talk about enough, is that co-living is a home, but it's also a place where you can work comfortably and thrive personally and professionally. Now, all of you, yeah, go ahead.
Because of course, during COVID, we focused on body health, but mental health is really important. We were talking about loneliness, access to proper facilities, and at least something that we experience in our residencies. And the confinement was really hard in Madrid, and at least people were still happy and on a day-to-day basis. And we can all observe the challenge it could have been. And so let's not forget about mental health in this difficult moment.
Yeah, I think that's something that we have focused on enormously in the last few months. It is something not only that people who have to stay in confinement in our rooms and apartments, but also how our staff are trained to accommodate and to work together with the people without having that physical closeness, because we still have a number of measures that have to be upheld, but making sure that events and ways of finding each other are available within our social spaces.
Yeah, maybe just to build on it quickly, I think this is also, at the beginning we spoke about the investment rationale. I think also precisely this point is also what making co-living, I mean, also not the most easy asset class for investors to dive into, because we're talking really about operational excellence. And we already see that a lot of real estate is becoming operational, from co-working to co-living. And this is really what, from any kind of typical resi developer or investor, I mean, the business case and the capacity that you need to have in order to make all of this happen, which is so fundamental to the success and the visitor experience, it just requires a complete different mindset. And again, an expertise. So that's where I think also we still see that not a lot of players are playing that co-living card really well and successfully. I mean, you could use it as a label, but are you able also to make it operational like this? I think that is an interesting jump that a lot of players that are aiming for it still need to make.
And I think that's something where we, as a hospitality concept, are something that are really quite aware of. Our people generally come from hospitality backgrounds, so that's not a far jump to make for us. It's something that really lives in our DNA at TSH. The other thing that I think I wanted to add to it is that you talked about that proximity to work, and I think one of the things that we're focusing on more and more at TSH is becoming that one-stop shop for urban living. You know, we already are hybrid, and we're expanding our offer. Well, in most cases, we already have a co-working, our collab concept, but we're expanding that and our meeting and events capacities and all and the gym and the play facilities that we have in our buildings really do make us somewhere where people can have that quality of life within one building. Obviously, we want people to go outside, but it is something that we really focus on to make sure that you know they have all the facilities they need to be successful for their urban start.
Yeah. And Dimfy, what does that mean for your investment model? How can people invest in a TSH building if it's inherently mixed use, as you both just said? How is it underwritten? Technically, from a real estate perspective, what are we talking about?
So we're an investor, developer, operator. So we're not an operational model. We actually own the real estate, and therefore we have a business case from the outset that sets out all these different uses in the building, and I use that underwriting to get approvals from our investors. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I kind of want to ask another question, if you allow me. Are you in the near or not near future going to look at selling some of your assets? And does that require change or mindset changes in the industry? I'm
not sure I understand the link between your question.
Well, If today you are sole owners of your assets, does that mean that the industry is not ready to buy your assets? That people are not ready to understand how it works, how important the operational excellence is, as Jörg said?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I think there's an enormous amount of interest in our operation as TSH and in our investment model from investors. The main thing that, because we have that whole chain and the real estate from start to finish, we have that in our control at the moment. We're able to create the communities in the way that we are, we know how to make that. I'm not excluding, the potential to look into more sort of operational models, but for the moment, this is how we've operated, and our plan is for growth rather than to start to look at different models at the moment. We still have a very big pipeline, so we have another 15 hotels in our pipeline, and that's something that we are focusing on at the moment. And obviously, there are people out in our business who are also looking at the further growth, the next steps.
Right. So in other words, your integrated model is a way for you to achieve operational excellence.
Yeah, I think from start to finish, the scoping is a very important part of a building, and a very important part of achieving the operational excellence at the end.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Maxime, is that also your strategy and approach?
Not really, because we are just an operator, and we are a humble operator of managed residential. It's not that fun, it's not that cool, but in the end, that's what we are at Urban Campus.
I think it's pretty cool.
Except we try to add some operational excellency thanks to some management views, some technology to make the business more fluid in terms of management and experience. But in the end, we are an operator of residential. We manage residential. And that's why I'll also actually in the title of the conference today, a new form of hospitality. We don't define ourselves at all as an hospitality operator. We define ourselves as an operator of residential business. And before joining Urban Campus and before discussing with Urban Campus, humbly, I hardly heard about co-living 18 months ago. And now we hear about co-living a bit everywhere. And it comes back to Jörg's point about the investment proposition on the real estate market. The issue is that now the word co-living is used in many formats. Dimfy, you were writing that some hotels, just because they have furnished rooms without any views about community, about management of operational management and excellency, they just brand it co-living because it's a cool word. And then maybe that's why it comes back to that's why some investors might be confused about the value proposition behind it. But in our view, our value proposition is to propose a residential asset with operational excellency on the operator side. And actually, it's maybe the state of the art in terms of services, in terms of customer centric. We are talking about communities, fully furnished, all utilities. But our conviction at Urban Campus is that in the end, these views about being customer centric with a bit of technology, a bit of operational excellency will spread out to the overall residential market. A little bit like e-commerce has challenged the retail real estate world 10 years ago. The co-working players have challenged the office real estate investors 5-6 years ago. We are convinced that in the end, what we learned from co-living management, state of the art on many parameters, will be able to be spread out on large scale residential with lighter potentially parameters, but with still this philosophy of sharing some resources. For example, why not having in a multi-family building, why not having a room for home working? Since we were saying not everyone can have a desk in the flat, why not proposing some kind of light space like this? So to make it short, to come back to the investment value proposition, we position ourselves as a residential operator with managing residential assets being valued at according to the residential product. And Claire was highlighting in her studies, for example, the business model of commercial lease, which is really often in the hospitality world, versus being a humble operator on the service of the owner in the residential business model.
Under management contract, for example. Yorick, anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, well, maybe two thoughts, but they're fully in line with what Maxime just said. I think the valuation itself is still complicated, and we've seen WeWork is a good example. How difficult. I mean, and I'm not so much talking about the IPO and that kind of stuff, but you see, like how do you really value that sort of operational excellence we just spoke of? How do you value residence life programs? How do you value the courses that DSH is providing to them, to the students to develop soft skills? I mean, there's a lot of stuff for a typical valuator is difficult, and also I would say for a typical institutional investor is still very complicated to just sort of grasp. And that's, of course, I mean, naturally, that's what you saw happening in the early days of European PBSA, and also now with purpose-built co-living. I mean, the terms are still blending a bit, but is that you saw, of course, private equity jumping in that category way quicker because they understand that sort of ambiguity. They appreciate it even because that's also where the value add really is. And then you slowly see that model builds trust, and then groups like APG, in the case of the Studentail, or other institutionals start to slowly sort of jump on the bandwagon. I still think, I mean, and it's interesting what's going to happen in the next couple of months. I think if you look, for example, at that was my second line of thought when it comes to investment. I think that whole idea of real estate ownership, I think is quite sustainable because I see that the volatility in the market, and this of course is quite extreme nowadays, but anyhow, you will always have some volatility. Having that sort of that bricks and mortar as a sort of underwriting underneath that sort of that evolving hospitality model, I mean, makes a lot of sense. And I think that's also where a lot of hotel groups with lease managements are now also vulnerable because they only rely on that logo and the people like with that sort of dedicated shirt on and behind the desk, and that's a very thin business proposition. So I'm very curious to see what's going to happen. I mean, if we can dive into some speculation towards the end, what will happen in the next couple of months with sort of poorly operating 2-star hotels in Milan or in Porto. I mean, I think if you're able as an investor to snap up some of these properties distressed right now, and really bring in that excellence that you guys at Urban Campus or TSH are pulling off, I think that there's a lot of value add in this moment. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the market will evolve from this investment rationale.
I cannot agree with you more, Yorick. There are many opportunities coming up. They're not just there yet, but we'll see in the next 6 months that there's consolidation is already on its way, but particularly in the hospitality market. And I see many opportunities for TSH as well. One further thing I wanted to add about the investment opportunity that TSH represents. So not only for private equity, because indeed we have that special source that they can further develop. I think the thing that makes us interesting also to institutional investors is the resilience that we offer within our model. And the fact that you have this hybrid nature that is able to shift between different uses, whilst that's very difficult in urban planning terms, it is something that does, from an operational perspective, allow for accommodating different markets and scenarios in the market. And therefore, we feel like we're well placed at the moment to look forward. Yeah. I think, can you hear me? I just got a...
Yeah, we lost you a little bit, but...
Yeah. So I think we're well placed to for the future, and given the fact that we're such a hybrid concept, and that resilience is attractive to institutional investors.
I think
sorry,
yeah,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Just one sentence. I think the urban planning point of sort of component that you mentioned in one sentence, I think is going to be key. And I think if cities want to sort of make sure that they get talent back to the core and really sort of fuel that knowledge economy, I think city governments all across Europe need to really rethink these kind of zoning models and really need to become more transparent, first of all, and more versatile to these kind of concepts, because otherwise you're really you're just wasting the momentum in a very sort of important moment nowadays.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that cities have kind of lost some cities have dealt with this crisis better than others. I know that a number of large cities have kind of lost their shine for a lot of not just young people, but also more more upwardly mobile people as well. And if you want to keep it an interesting place, places like co-living places and universities that are open and other learning institutions need to grasp onto that, the hybridness and the mix between living, working and learning needs to be brought back into the city in a more flexible urban solution.
And if we dive into the speculation, do you think those changes are sustainable? Are cities really gonna lose their shine in the long term? Are people going to want to go back to the core after COVID? What are we thinking about this? And is this changing the value proposition of co-living?
I'm not sure that for the very long term. I do think that there are specific groups within cities, the commuters that have commuted for hours and 1.5 hours will their mode of working and living will have changed. I think it represents, but there is always going to be a core city dweller.
Yeah, I think the history of cities over 2,000 years shows that this is evolving. I mean, it's going back and forth. I don't really, I have a very strong opinion about it. I really don't see people sort of flooding to more rural areas. I mean, maybe it's nice if you have 2 kids and you anyhow want to move out of the city. I mean, this might be an accelerator. I think on the long term, people need proximity. I think even the commuting point that Dimpy just raised is only enforcing that kind of density and compactness of cities, because the more able, and I see that in some of my projects where in industrial areas or office parks, we're adding residential, we're adding co-living to really make that sort of that vibe and that sort of that compact city sort of character very explicit. So I think for me, definitely, I mean, it's a very popular topic among urbanists and urban planners, but I really don't see the end of the city. No.
So maybe to wrap up this conversation, we all are firm believers in cities, and we probably see co-living as a solution for urban life. I agree with you all on that, even though there are co-living concepts that target more rural or non-urban locations. And yes, I agree with you. All cities are an economic and life magnet. That's where human civilization was born and is getting born every day again. So I see that thriving too. Any final word from any of you before we close this panel? In that case, thank you very much to the 3 of you. It was a very, very interesting conversation. I hope we can keep talking maybe on social media after this, and maybe even collaborate.
And thank you, Claire, for.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.